one of my previous videos, I noted the fact that in some places we don't know exactly what the Bible originally said. And just to set some context, I'm talking New Testament specifically in this video, although a lot of what I'm going to say holds true for the Old Testament as well. I thought for a while about how exactly I wanted to introduce this video and how exactly I wanted to phrase that first thing I said, because I need to be understood as not saying more or less than I am. But the simple truth is, there are places where we are not certain what the Bible originally said. That doesn't matter. In this particular way, in the places where we are not sure what exactly the Bible originally said, these are not places that impact what we would know as Christian doctrine, the corpus of teaching that is to be believed by members of the Christian faith. The places where we are not exactly sure what the Bible originally said do not impact Christian doctrine. I want to lay that out clearly before I talk about some examples of places where we are not sure exactly what the Bible originally said. Now, I've used this phrase in a few of my other videos, textual transmission. At some point, the writers of the Bible sat down and wrote the books that we now have in our Bible, in this collection of books that we call the Bible. They wrote something. We are not always sure in all places exactly what that something was. But again, the places where we aren't sure do not impact Christian doctrine. This coming Sunday, which will actually have already passed by the time this video comes out, I'm going to be preaching on Luke chapter 17, verses 1 through 10. There are two what we would call textual variants, places where we're not sure whether the Bible says quite this or this in Luke 17, verses 1 through 10. I've got them here on a piece of paper. I'm going to share them with you, and I'm going to do a little bit of what I like to think of as one of my party tricks. Our church network, the Wisconsin Lutheran Synod, trains its clergy to understand Greek and Hebrew, to be able to work with the original languages of the Bible, and we're trained in the basics of textual transmission, textual variants. This is also something that I take particular academic interest in. Part of my master's thesis dealt with some textual variants in the book of Acts. Here are the two textual variants that you'll find in Luke chapter 17. Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and at one point there's a particular Greek word which we're not sure exactly what he said. Did Jesus say, follow closely, hamarte, hamartese, hamarteise, hamarteseise? Perhaps you don't know what the difference between those options would be. I'll translate them in English. Did Jesus say, if he should sin against you, when he should sin against you, when he should sin, if he should sin? Those are the four options in this particular section. It's in verse 3 of Luke chapter 17 where Jesus is talking about, let's say that a fellow believer, one of your brothers, sins. There's the question. Does Jesus say something like, if he sins, when he sins, if he sins against you, when he sins against you? Now, some of those changes can alter the meaning of this particular passage a little bit. If Jesus said, if he sins against you, that narrows the focus of the situations that he's describing and talking about and instructing us on how to act as Christians. It does. It affects the particular meaning of Luke 17, verse 3 itself. But the totality of Christian doctrine is not affected by the specific circumstance that Luke chapter 17, verse 3 speaks about. The next example from that selected pericope, what we call a selection of verses from the Bible, Luke chapter 17, verses 1 to 10, the pericope in question. In verse 9, here are the various options. Jesus either said, diatakthenta, didakthenta, diatakthenta auto, panta ta diatakthenta, diatakthenta udoko, panta diatactenta udoko, diatetagmena udoko, diatacthenta auto udoko. Now, I'll go back down those. The first one would be the things having been commanded. The next one would be the things having been taught. The next one is the things having been commanded to him. The next one is all the things having been commanded. The next one is the things having been commanded, and then there's an interesting little thing. It says, I think not. The next option is all the things having been commanded. I think not. The next one is a slightly different word for the word command, but it also means the things having been commanded. I think not. And the last one is the things having been commanded to him. I think not. The context is that Jesus is talking about, again, following his instructions about how we are to live. And he tells his disciples this short parable. He says, let's imagine a servant who his master gives him commands and he carries them out. Does the master have some kind of obligation to look at that servant in a special way and show him special favor because he did the things that he was told to do? No. And it's that phrase, the things he was told to do, the things he was commanded to do, that's where we're not exactly sure what Jesus said. Did he say the things commanded to him to do, or just the things commanded to do, for instance, with a couple of these variants? That one is of even less import than the one in verse 3, as you can tell. And again, I'm going to be very frank. We do not know what Jesus said exactly in Luke chapter 17, verse 9. But we know what he said. We understand the message there. That's the most common kind of variant in the New Testament. Spots where there's a single word or a couple of letters that slightly perhaps change the meaning, or there's a synonym for a word that some Bible copies have. None of them impact Christian doctrine. Very few of them even change the meaning of the particular verse. None of them, again, I'll say it, impact Christian doctrine. Now, there are other variants that are more significant. I'll give you an example of one, what we sometimes call the pericope of the woman caught in adultery. This is in John chapter 8. Jesus is confronted by some of his enemies. They have found this woman who was engaged in adultery. They're telling him, hey, Moses' law says we've got to kill her. What say you, Jesus? And Jesus tells them, sure. The one who is himself without sin, go ahead, cast the first stone. The crowd slowly files away, shamefaced, and eventually it's just Jesus and the woman, and he tells her, oh, your accusers have all gone? Very well. Go now, sin no more. That story is not in the oldest copies of John's Gospel. It's an interesting one. I will admit, I don't exactly know why that story isn't in the oldest copies of John's Gospel. My personal opinion, to be very clear, that's what you're about to hear, Tim's personal opinion. It's an authentic story of something that happened in the life of Jesus, but which none of his biographers, the people whom we call the gospel writers, the evangelists, none of them recorded it initially in their gospel, but it is an authentic event from his life. And at a later time, someone who knew of this event slotted it into John's gospel in a place that either chronologically it was appropriate or thematically they found it appropriate. I don't know, to be honest, why John's gospel later began including this story. I think it's a genuine story of Jesus. But once again, you could take that whole story, which would be a shame. It's a beautiful, rich story about the love and forgiveness which God offers through Jesus. You could take that story out of the Bible, shame though it might be, and Christian doctrine remains the same. Christian doctrine, the corpus of teaching which the Christian faith clings to, is not changed by the removal of or addition of the pericope of the adulterous woman. Now, these are important questions, these issues of textual transmission and of trying to, as accurately as possible, determine what the Bible's writers originally wrote. That is an important thing to do. But At the end of the day, if you changed every single instance of variance like this simply by flipping a coin, throwing a dart at a board, and picking a random one, you would end up with a Bible that is, on the whole, exactly the same as the one that you can pick up off a shelf and read. That's the simple truth about textual variance. Thanks for watching that, friends, and I'll see you in the next video.